The Marikana Massacre in 2012 will be commemorated in Johannesburg today. The president of AMCU Union, Joseph Mathunjwa, says they're still waiting for President Cyril Ramaphosa to come and apologize to the wounded mine workers and widows of those who lost their lives. Speaking in an exclusive interview with SABC News, he said justice had not prevailed. Patrick Dindwa and Dumi Khabautwelui compiled this report.
Will be the first time for the commemoration to be hosted outside Marikana, where 34 mine workers were killed when they were shot by heavily armed police. The leadership of the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, AMCU, says very little has changed in the 8 years since the incident, and they are hopeful that President Ramaphosa will keep his promises to visit Marikana.
He promised the nation that he will come, and we said, fine, we'll welcome him, we'll take him through the processes, because it's not only the widows, even the workers that were injured, even the workers in general that were traumatized, and the nation at large. But this hasn't happened. We don't know why he's delaying this process. We're still waiting. He's still a president of the country, for that matter. He do have all the resources. So we've been waiting. We're still waiting. Maybe the time will come.
Mathunjwa says even the Marikana Commission of Inquiry, led by retired Judge Ian Farlam, which was meant to probe the tragedy, was just a useless exercise.
If the commission was to be conducted by the state, of which the state was involved with the capital, so the outcome and the recommendation might not be objective. As you see even today, the justice hasn't been served. But all over the world, most of the commission, they don't result in arrest of any person or any perpetrators. It becoming just a PR exercise at the end of the day.
Those that have survived the fatal shooting are still calling for justice to prevail.
Everything that happened to us, one day it will be cleared by the court of law, because the Farlam Commission, which was established, was not meant for us. It was meant for them to hide the bad things that they did to us black people.
One of the women whose husband was killed on that day says they are still waiting for government to come and talk to them.
She says she's really hurting as they are sitting at home with their children. There is no progress. Even the government has never came to talk to them about what happened. Since they said they will come. It's 8 years now, nothing has happened.
Meanwhile, AMCU says this year's commemoration will be in the form of a small physical gathering in order to comply with lockdown regulations. Patrick Dindwa, SABC News, Marikana outside Rustenburg.
We'll have different conversations today regarding that day. But following the now called Marikana Massacre, a report dated the 31st of March 2015 was submitted to government by the Farlam Commission. As we remember that fateful day when police opened fire on civilians, we're asking, has enough been done to bring about justice? Bishop Jo Seoka was a constant figure in the action to hold authorities to account. He joins us now via Skype. Always a pleasure talking to you, Bishop. Thank you so much for making the time this morning.
Thank you for having me, Desiree.
Have you been to church already?
Yes.
Well, thank you once again. Bishop, how are you feeling on this day? 8 years down the line, there's still no sense of justice prevailing.
It's really sad because the struggle continues. Personally, I still continue to say that the voice that came through my phone saying, Bishop, where are you? The police are killing us, is still haunting me today. If that be the case with me, how much more with the widows, with the orphans, with the comrades of the fallen mine workers? And so it is said that we continue to remember this day as a day where blood was lost unnecessarily, just because the government of the day did not take seriously the plea of the workers who were crying for their dignity, wanting a living wage. If we were to go back to Marikana, particularly at Nkaneng, there is nothing tangible that one can point at and say, this is what the people of Marikana died for. They died in vain. We still don't have proper housing facilities for these miners. Most of them continue to live in the shacks and in the nearby communities. The infrastructure has not been developed. There is still roads that are improperly constructed, lack of water. There is no sanitation. Most of the water is being used for mining, not for people who actually need, particularly at this time of COVID-19, where we must sanitize, wash our hands, and do all the hygienic things to protect ourselves. And so I remember very clearly, because I was there, and I was told, for instance, that this is the day to end up this whole thing. And a few hours thereafter, as I was told to leave the compound, police started shooting. Now, why would the police, for instance, use live ammunition to resolve a strike? Why were undertakers called to the site instead of ambulances? Why were the mortuary people asked to prepare spaces instead of hospital outpatients to be ready to receive the injured? And so all those things come to mind, and it really makes one very, very sad.
Bishop, we've previously spoken to you, and you have alluded to the fact that what they were really asking for was a wage increase, and even that has not been effected.
Absolutely. They wanted a living wage of 12,500. And I was part of the negotiating team. And we engaged the mining authorities, and we agreed that they will increase the salary by 22%. To date, there are people who still earn far less than what the company promised. I've seen some of the pay slips. It's disgraceful that very few are actually being paid what was asked for at the time, 12,500 as a living wage. Most of them are still very much underpaid and struggle to survive. That is a promise unfulfilled. I have an article, I think, today on the Sunday Independent, where I say all the promises made have not been fulfilled. There is more talk than action. Even with the present company, we hear the very same stories that Mr. Magara of Lonmin was telling, now being told by Mr. Frontman. They say they've done the following. For instance, he says he has built houses, 6 houses out of 13. What is that when there were 34 people who were brutally murdered, plus 10 who died prior to the massacre? They say they have put a memorial stone. That's nothing. What we have been asking them to do is to build a memorial facility where people will go and receive counseling and be allowed to talk about the pain they experience and continue to experience.
Bishop,
We've asked them to...
I'm going to ask you to hold on to that thought there. We're also asking our viewers today what their thoughts are about Marikana being commemorated in a different province. But we'll talk about this in a while. For now, I'd just like to cross live to our reporter, Sellwane Khakhau, who is at the is in Marikana? Yes, she's in Marikana. Sellwane, what is happening there today since the memorial is being held in a different venue?
Well, a very good morning to you. Indeed, you are correct to say that the commemoration this year is being held in a different province. It's being held in Johannesburg, but since 2013, the commemoration has been held right here at this particular spot where we are coming live to you from at the Gopi in Vonorkop. This is where the 34 mine workers were shot and killed on the 16th of August in 2012. It has been relatively quiet. I mean, you would know that in the past years, this place on this particular day is usually very busy. We would see huge marquees here. We would see lots of different people coming here to pay their respects to the mine workers who were shot and killed. And we would also see cultural performances, musical performances. But today it is a different commemoration for the people here. As you can see in the background there are some relatives of the mine workers who were shot and killed. They've been coming here on their own. Also some community members trickling in one by one to say we are here to pay our last respects, or rather to pay our annual respects to the mine workers who were shot and killed here. And I'm joined right now by Napoleon Webster. He is a community leader here in Marikana, and he was also one of the people who were here at the spot 8 years ago when the mine workers were shot and killed. Let's just speak to him to get more details. Webster, thank you very much for joining us. We know that you were here with the mine workers 8 years ago when they were shot. Coming here today, seeing how quiet it is, I mean, it's very unusual for such a commemoration or for this day to be observed. How does it sit with you guys?
No, it is very painful because we draw an inspiration from this place. This is our sacred place, and when the commemoration perhaps is elsewhere and we are here, we find like the commemoration is without the spirit, the spirit of this place. As we discussed earlier, we are fighting that this place should be actually protected. It should be a sacred place because this is where our heroes were murdered. This is where the men, 34 miners were murdered by the system, and these are the people who confronted the miners, the mining corporations. We've had unions talking, we have had politicians talking. These are the heroes. Instead of singing and dancing, they confronted the system head on, and the mining companies had to involve politicians so that they could deal with the miners. That resilience, it's so powerful to us. It's an inspiration to us. So when we are not able to commemorate, to remember our heroes, it is so painful. It feels like our spirit has been detached from us. We would love to be here in memory of those, in the spirit of those who left us.
We also know that there is, if we can call it, a burning issue for the residents of Marikana, especially the widows and families of, the mine workers who were shot and killed. We know that the widows will be marching to the Gopi this morning, and they're basically saying that they want justice for their husbands and their brothers who lost their lives. What I know is that residents of Marikana say to this day, 8 years later, they still no justice. Take us through that one more time, please.
It is very painful that our black government is not making an effort for us to find a closure. It is very painful that people who are in power, being of our own skin, black like us, that are not doing enough to come up with solutions so that we can have a closure. This is a very painful chapter. During Sharpeville massacre, it was white people against us as black people. We are fighting for our freedom, we are fighting for our land, but now here we are, politicians being used as security guards of mining exploitative active mining companies. It's very painful that these politicians, they've become security guards. They're no longer for us. They're no longer talking freedom that we fought for. That actually, it's an insult that we have black faces in leadership positions, but we don't have anybody who is making an initiative to say, no, let's close this chapter, compensate these people. Why do we have to go to courts to resolve our problems as a race? Why should we be killed by the black police? Why should politicians who are voted by us turn against us? Why should the communities around the mining the mines suffer? Why should they be deprived to participate in the mining operations? Why should Bidvest, an international company, come here and even supply a mere toilet paper? What special skill do you need to supply a toilet paper? It is very painful that our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, he's not doing enough. He has not even made an effort to come here and apologize to the nation and say, it was our mistakes. We look up to these people. Majority of the people who put them in power are us, black people. Why? Who are they representing? Or do they only come to us when they are coming with food parcel and t-shirts? I mean, it's very painful that we still have to. I don't know which freedom are we fighting now when our own leaders, own brothers, people of our own skin are now becoming garden boys of the Ruperts, the Oppenheimers, the mining companies.
Okay. Very strong emotions coming there from the residents of Marikana. Another issue that I just want to highlight is that we have observed, even yesterday when we arrived here in Marikana, is that, Marikana is still very much a volatile area. It's still very much violent, if you'd like to put it that way, or dangerous, if you would like to use that word. I can tell you that last night we tried speaking to some of the mine workers who were there on that actual day, but of course survived. And I can tell you that many of them are still too afraid to speak to the media out there about what really happened on that particular day and events that have happened since that fateful day. Many of them saying that we can't speak to the media even if we want to, because we will be shot and killed. So now let's talk quickly about the situation on the ground. Can we call it censorship? Can we call it anxiety? What is it that the residents of Marikana are feeling about this situation, that they don't feel safe 8 years later?
No, it is painful that even the police, I'm talking to you as a victim. I was arrested some 3 years ago, put in prison, and entirely because the police are pushing political agendas. It is a very difficult situation whereby even the residents of Marikana, we do not trust the police. You visited our place yesterday when we had a night vigil. You saw the place, and it is considered a no-go area for the police. Where can we run to when the police are performing political agendas? Where should we run to when our own ministers they're protecting the interests of the mining companies instead of our interest? The air here is polluted. There's so much happening. The air is polluted, and there's no initiative from the government to protect us. Whom are they protecting? There were supposed to be some mechanism to extract this polluted air so that we can be safe. The roads are still bad, and Lonmin, Sebanye, they continue looting our minerals without our beneficiation. Without our benefit, it's so painful. It is so painful.
Yes. Well, due to time constraints, Napoleon Webster, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Napoleon Webster is the community leader here in Marikana, and he was telling us how the residents continue to be affected by the happenings there of the 16th of August 2012, saying that the situation on the ground has not changed that much 8 years later. Studio, it's back to you for now.
Thank you very much, Sellwane Khakhau. There, let's go back to our conversation with Bishop Sioka. Bishop, when we cut off our conversation, you were talking about the other mining company, Sibanye Stillwater, that Lonmin has since sold to. Has this made conversation difficult about how to pay back and reparations?
Not really. What is happening is that Sibanye is retelling the story as it was told by Magara of Lonmin. They claim, for instance, to have a vision for renewal of Marikana. And I'm saying that we can't see any tangible, sustainable programs that they are doing. Things that we have asked for have not been done. I personally have been engaging the largest chemical company, BASF, in Germany as a supply chain to take responsibility for the massacre. And they refuse to do that, as much as our government refuses to take some responsibilities, even of simply apologizing to the nation of what happened. And so I cannot say to you the massacre has brought any changes to Marikana. As I was saying earlier, the salary for which they died for, they are not receiving it. People are still underpaid. People continue to suffer lack of water, most of which is used for mining. People are still without proper sanitation. We have not seen anything that we can say this is what Sibanye has done, which Lonmin did not do. So the narrative remains as it was 8 years ago. They talk of the 1608 Memorial Trust. It's an old story. They claim now to have been building houses for the widows. We asked them, why do you repeat what Mr. Matunjo is doing through AMCU? Isn't that not just publicity stunts to make your company look better than Lonmin, which also claim to have been contributing towards accommodation, only to build family flats, which the miners refused to use because they were asked to pay rent, which they could not afford because their salaries were too low.
Bishop, because of time constraints now, I'm just going to ask you, the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, AMCU, which you just spoke about now, says the Farlam Commission was a farce. Are you of the same sentiment?
Absolutely, because nothing has come out of it. The president of this country, Cyril Ramaphosa, wrote an email almost instructing government to use force to stop the strikers. He has not apologized. The perpetrators are still walking freely outside when people died, widows and orphans suffering. And so the Farlam Commission was also, for me, a PR exercise that has not yielded any fruits that benefit the victims. And so I want to say to you that we still want Cyril as a president, who at the time was a director at Lonmin, to publicly apologize, go to Marikana, call the workers together and say, look, I made a mistake, I am sorry. We still want to have a memorial site building where people can go and cry if they want to cry, celebrate if they want to celebrate, receive counseling, so that they receive healing. We still want sustainable development that we can be proud of as a contribution towards rebuilding of that community. We're asking Sibanye Stillwater to share the information. People have no knowledge of what they're doing. Community is not participating. They are not helping community build capacity. There is no effort for social cohesion. There is nothing that we have asked them to do, especially on the issue of SLPs to share with other companies the amount available to help with the development. So what are we celebrating really? Nothing. We're only commemorating the incident that pains all of us as a nation.
Bishop, outside of Marikana, you work extensively with miners, and the issues that you mention about the miners in Marikana sometimes are pervasive. They're not unique to miners in Marikana. As we wrap up our conversation, please just tell us about that other work you do with miners, not only in South Africa, but in the SADC region.
Well, at the moment, we are busy with justice for miners. We're calling for justice for the mining communities. There are hundreds, 500,000 of miners that suffered silicosis and tuberculosis. And there's 5 billion that needs to be paid out. And we're trying to set up the system so that these miners, some of them have died already, and some are dying because of COVID-19, that they be compensated. And we're doing this work throughout the SADC community. Here in South Africa, we have chapters that are assisting us organizing these communities and educating people of their rights and what they need to do to be compensated. And that is what I am doing right now. And we're saying that COVID-19 shouldn't be an excuse for helping these desperate families whose breadwinners have died or are unable to provide for them right now. So the Justice for Miners is hard at work trying to look back at historical developments of mines and what they have contributed towards the destruction of human dignity. Something that the Marikana miners died for, because it was not only crying for a living wage, but a living wage that will define them as fully human, that restores their dignity as human beings.
You're talking about COVID-19 not being used as an excuse, and this is one question I wanted to ask you. Because of COVID-19 restrictions, the commemoration was moved to Midrand, a different province from where the massacre took place. What are your thoughts about Marikana being commemorated in a different province?
I think it's unfortunate personally, because commemorations of this nature need to be done on site. When you remember your deceased parents, you go to the graveyard and you stand there, and as an African, you speak to their spirit, and as a Christian, you say your prayer where they are. So moving it from Marikana is an unfortunate development, and I think that it needs to be corrected, because as Napoleon was saying, the spirit of these people is in that copy, and that copy is a sacred site that needs to be used to memorize and to keep the narrative alive of these people.
And Bishop, just quickly, what are you doing today? How are you commemorating?
Well, today I'm going to do special prayers for the deceased, and I am going to be going to the memorial service in Soweto, and I shall be also using some telephone counseling, because there are people calling to say this day reminds us, it's like rubbing salt into the wound. And I'm still going to be appealing to Cyril, our president, to please have courage to stand up and apologize. And for the policing system to make sure that justice is served. We cannot continue to have people who committed such heinous crimes still working on our society.
We hope
they need to be to have peace.
We hope all the amazing work you're doing is not in vain. Thank you so much for speaking to us once again.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much, Desiree. Bye-bye.
Bishop Jo Seoka there. Meanwhile, the widows of Marikana are expected to march from Vonderkop Stadium in the northwest to the scene of the massacre at the Kopi. We'll bring you that story as it unfolds.